Excellent. Whenever we're ready, are we ready? Thank you very much, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Executive Board of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. Welcome to our guests here and abroad. Hello. Excellent. We will start with our agenda. So first, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
No, Chair, there are no apologies.
Excellent. So that's that done. Declarations of interest. Is there anybody who would like to declare an interest on any matter on the agenda? Yes, Dave.
Yeah, I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you, Dave. That's noted. Is there anybody else? If anything comes to mind before the relevant agenda item, it's possible to do that at that point, as always. Agenda item number 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy? Have we all received it? Have we all looked at it? Are we all happy with it? If there is no objections, I will sign those as an accurate record of last time's meeting, which, hearing no objections, I will do. So thank you very much for that. Agenda item number 4, questions from members of the public. So we have got 2 questions today. They both relate to agenda item number 6, the greenways. We have published the details of these questions online, and we have received them as well as members of the board. And we will take them both at the start of agenda item number 6. Number 5, we have the usual item on the feedback from the Joint Assembly. We are joined by Councillor Tim Bick, who is the Chair of the Assembly. Hello, Tim. Very lovely to see you. He will provide an overview of how the meeting went on the 16th of February. As usual, we have a report from him, which has been circulated with the papers for this meeting. Usually, Tim likes to introduce the Joint Assembly feedback on every item of the agenda, so I will assume that we will do that this time as well. Which leads us to agenda item number 6, the Greenways, Barton, Hornsey, Melbourne and Sawston. We are on page 14 of your agenda pack, if you are following it. We will take public questions on this item first. We will respond to those questions. We will then receive an officer presentation on this item. Then we will receive the Assembly's feedback, and then we will debate the item. So, public questions on this item. I believe we are joined online by Iris and Yunus. Are you there? Very welcome. I'm very sorry you couldn't make it today. I know you wanted to be here. Sorry that things went a bit wrong. We are delighted that you're still here with us remotely. Would you like to ask your questions now? Whenever you're ready. You are unfortunately muted.
No, that's good.
a modular version is built and ready to use.
Thank you so much, Iris. Bless you for that question. Thank you so much. Do we have another question from the household? Shall we take that now? Whenever you're ready, no rush.
My name is Eunice. I also came to the GCP meeting with my sister Iris and my friend Alfie 4.5 years ago. We are all really impatient to see safe and environmentally friendly local travel options for places we need to get to every day. My family doesn't own a car, so we go everywhere by bike, train, or on foot. I want to ask about the link from Meldriff train station to Muller. Together with my sister and my friends from school, I walk between our houses near Meldriff train station and Melbourne Village College every day. This takes us along a narrow footpath that is in constant use every day by students, commuters, and not. The only permitted option at the moment for bicycles to travel between Meldriff and Meldriff Station and Melbourne Station Road over a railway bridge together, with all the cars and lorries that make it a very busy place. This bridge has a pinch point that is very unsafe for cyclists when cars and lorries overtake near the blind peak of the bridge. This route is also not safe for pedestrians because the pavement is so narrow and not continuous, so you have to cross the road multiple times. With station roads so unsafe, everyone is forced to use the tiny footpath. We are glad to see that a plan exists to widen this footpath in order to provide safe and direct link for cyclists to Meldriff train station as part of the Melbourne Greenway. How soon will this be completed?
Thank you so much, Eunice. Thank you both for those questions. Very, very glad to see you today. Peter, would you like to answer our listeners?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Iris. I thank you for your question. I remember you coming 4.5 years ago. A lot has happened in terms of the key big picture issues around the Greenway since then. So the Executive Board agreed a programme to deliver them by 2025, including the Melbourne Greenway. They also approved just short of £80 million to deliver that. But I understand your impatience with us getting on with it. You're right about the bridge to Royston is the last piece in the jigsaw of the Melbourne Greenway. We agreed at the time to produce a design for that bridge, which I hope in the next couple of weeks will be completed. And when it is, I will send it to you and we'll put it online. And we also undertook with partners, particularly at Cambridge County Council, to bid for funding for the bridge. As you say in your question, we've already tried once. We were unsuccessful, but you better believe we'll be trying again. We expect there to be other funding opportunities coming forward over the next 12 or 18 months. And we will be putting the bridge in, submit for funding for the bridge in those opportunities to see if we can complete the link over to Royston when we finalise the Melbourne Greenway. Again, Eunice, I remember you coming. Councillor Bridget Smith and I had a meeting in Melbourne 10 days ago about this particular link to the rail station, and actually it's in our papers today. And what our papers today say is that with a fair wind, we should deliver that link within the next financial year, so within 12 months or so's time. We've got one or two outstanding issues around land, but we do know that the landowner is very supportive. But certainly if the paper goes through today, and I expect the board to approve it, the funding will be available. The contractor is now lined up to do the work. We just need to finalise the legal agreements to do that. So again, hopefully in the near future, we'll have some positive news to report to you and to Iris in terms of progressing the scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you guys so much for intervening. We are all extremely keen that you get your cycleway and that you get it when you're still young enough to come and talk to us. And what I want to see is I want you to not look too different when you come to us in a year's time, perhaps, and tell us, thank you that you did it, finally. And, hopefully that time we will be here in person. But thank you so much for coming, and so very, very good to see you. We will now go to Thomas, who is going to introduce the report for us. Thomas, are you here? Hi, Thomas. I am very sorry. What's going on?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is the latest in a series of detailed papers on the greenways. Members will recall that in December we brought Comberton and Haslingfield, and we're now bringing Barton, Horningsea, Melbourne and Sawston. Section 2.1 of the report sets out the key recommendations, which includes approvals to submit for the necessary consents for each greenway, and importantly, to agree changes to the designs resulted from the engagement that we did before Christmas. I don't intend to go into detail on these. They're set out in tables 1 to 8, but very happy to take questions in a second. I do, though, want to highlight 2 areas of the report relating to changes since the Joint Assembly. One has just been gone into in detail, which was section 3.12 on the Meldreth link, so I won't repeat that. But section 3.3, at the Joint Assembly, the Chair recommended that we needed to do a little bit more with local members. In response to that, we have set up and sent out invites for half-day sessions with all local members affected by the greenways. Those will be held on the 22nd of March and the 27th of April. These events will be our next step in our ongoing engagement with members, and the intention is that they will, continue right the way through to delivery with ongoing engagement on each individual greenway. Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tom, so much. Thank you, everyone, for questions and answers so far. Councillor Bake, would you like to tell us how the debate went on this item at the Joint Assembly?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Most of my report is devoted to this item, which was a long debate in the Assembly. I think overall, the reasons for the long debate are good news for the GCP, because there is a continuing high level of commitment and even passion amongst a lot of members of the Assembly for it. And as I've reported before, if there is a criticism, it's more coming from the impatience in getting results, which I think perhaps we all share. To highlight the points that I'm raising with you from that debate, there were a number of specific points where we believe we did get commitments from officers during our debate, which had not been present before, which we welcome, and just I think it's clear that they are reflected in the report today, but they were an opportunity to review the question of a purpose-built crossing at Bates Bight Lock in relation to the Horningsea Greenway. That was the first. The second was the one you've just heard about in the public question on the Melbourne Greenway, and I'm sort of very happy to hear of the progress that's been made since then, and I think high likelihood that that's now going to happen, that link between the station and the science park, which I think the whole Assembly, even those not familiar with the area, can see is really central to the broader mission of the GCP in relation to centres of employment and access to them. And the third point was in relation to the Sawston Greenway, different type of point here, where a question was raised about whether we may be duplicating what is available for cyclists in that corridor, given the CSET scheme, which we may be accustomed to looking at in a separate compartment of our minds, but actually is covering in part a similar trajectory. And given the the potential for financial constraints to bear in on this, we did agree that we wanted officers to look at that further to see if we didn't need all of what is proposed in the Greenway project. Then there were a whole series of other design issues which were raised by different members across the Assembly. I haven't recited them in my report because officers did note them, but importantly they did confirm that the decision that you'll be taking today as a board doesn't foreclose on those issues being taken account of as the designs go forward. So I think no need to put the spotlight on those at the moment, and hope that we will see some consideration of those before we get to the following stage. And then there were three issues in relation to the broader Greenway network. It seems that whenever we talk about the specific Greenways, we also come back with views about the wider programme for the Greenways. But I think they include some important issues here. Firstly, it was the view was taken, and I can say with some confidence that the main strategic purpose of the Greenways could do with better definition, and that definition, members of the Assembly felt, should be around modal switch, and that switch needs to be defined specifically in the project plans for the programme. And I think it was said that that as we stand, that is set at a default 20%, because that satisfies the Department for Transport. But I think members of the Assembly felt that we should be more specific about that and judge the projects accordingly as they are implemented. And in fact, one of the reasons I think that prompted our debate was that that if we aren't clear about the main strategic purpose of the programme, then we can end up getting deflected into sort of ancillary goals, which may be nice to have, but especially also as we move into maybe more financial pressure on this programme and others, that it would be important that we had a clarity about what this was really, really there for, and that we might want to do as much else as we can, but if there is a crunch, then some of those nice-to-have things are not included. So big plea for definition of purpose around modal switch. There was also a discussion which I'm not sure there was a complete consensus around the purity with which we pursue the guidance of LTN 120. Officers have confirmed that that will remain the goal, which I think pleases everyone. But there are still some situations, I think, in some of the Greenways where perfection can be the enemy of the good, or even perfection can be the enemy of the possible. And so I think I'm doing right by reflecting that is perhaps a natural division of opinion that people have, but that maybe we need to look at that trade-off between the purity and the realism rather carefully. And then the final point was about how we take people with us on this journey for the Greenways. As I've reported before, every time we have an item on the agenda, there's lots of frustration, there's lots of discussion of detail, sometimes quite small, and even the Assembly, which is there with quite a few people who understand their areas, it's difficult entirely to do that justice. It has to happen to some degree through dialogue that goes on outside the board, outside the assembly, but avoiding maybe the sort of the heavy infrastructure of sort of formal committees, but just dialogue with elected members. And I think that the feeling was that this was time for a reset. And the news from Thomas just now that there is going to be an opportunity for members to understand the process, meet the team, and get a grip on how ongoing dialogue is going to happen in relation to each of the greenways, which all locally elected members from the respected areas can attend so that they can inform their public and avoid this sense in which actually the GCP is probably doing what it said it would do so far on greenways, but there is this sort of sense, perhaps because of the absence of communication, that isn't the case. And I think that is a very bad situation that we could quite easily avoid. So good news with the response to what the Assembly said. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim. Very, very useful indeed. Right, I'm going to open this up for discussion. I think I've seen Bridget first, if you want to start.
Thank you very much. So firstly, I'm very pleased to see this paper come, so that, you know, that's real progress. Secondly, I'd like to support what Councillor Bick has said about how we measure success. So back when I first got involved in this, it was all about modal shift, and modal shift means getting people out of their cars. So I think we need to be very careful that we stay true to that and that we don't get sidetracked with the easier option, which is talking about increase in cycle journeys. It's got to be, you know, the decrease in car journeys. And, you know, when we are trying to assess the, you know, the success of these schemes, which aren't cheap, you know, we really need to be able to demonstrate that we've taken cars off the roads as well as encourage people to cycle more. So I think we've got to stay very true to that. As Peter said, we had a meeting with TTP at Melbourne on their business park there with all the local members, which I think we went some way to reassuring people who needed quite a lot of reassurance. They've offered up money. They're just about to open their new premises. Their workforce is arriving, and, you know, the cycleway isn't there. So, you know, and I fully understand why that's the case. So I think we need to make sure that we keep up that sort of engagement, particularly with the business sector, who are, you know, have their travel to work plans for their workforce, who are, when they are recruiting for people, they're saying, well, you can get to us by active travel. So, you know, we need to make sure that we are not undermining what the businesses are saying. So I think we need to do more of that if the opportunity arises. And then just a very small point, I don't know whether when these greenways open we do any kind of sort of ceremony and so on, but if over this elusive link to the station, you know, if we decide to do anything that cut of ribbon, can I suggest we invite those two lovely young people to be the ribbon cutters? Thank you.
That sounds like an excellent idea, Bridget. Before I bring in other people, I do actually want to underscore, first of all, just how important it is that we just make sure that we keep in touch with each other, because it's getting to the point where the message that this is happening needs to get to the people who actually don't have a thing to point to when businesses and people all over the place are demanding for these things to finally be delivered. And that's very, very important. We also, and I speak very much for myself as much as Bridget here, we need to make sure we do the work with our respective hats on, because there's quite a lot of joint working and joined up thinking that we need to do with our respective authorities, with the planning authority, for managing these bridges, these junctions that need to be managed, and as a highways authority, with bridges and junctions that need managing. We all need to make sure that we do that work with our other hats on as well, because GCP alone by itself can't do everything. And I think it's really very important that that work carries on at pace, which will also help with the point that the Assembly was making around, you know, what does it actually mean? What do we want to achieve in terms of when people are using these things? What do we mean by switching off the mode of transport, but also what do we mean in terms of how does that fit with the objectives, not just of the GCP, but more importantly, the objectives of the Highways Authority and the Transport Authority and the Planning Authority as well. So absolutely all of that is very, very important. And I'm only saying that in response to what I've heard so far, so there might be other people that want to make more points. Andy, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think always the temptation with these projects is to go into the micro detail on the schemes you know about. So I'll do that, but I'll use it in a strategic context to try and justify it. So I think the first one was quite interesting, this links to stations or modal shift. I think we had a good example there of connecting Melbourne to Meldworth is actually quite important. I know when I was doing a survey years ago, in another role I had, we looked at places like Ely, all the train stations, and said, what could we do to improve sustainable access to those stations? I'm sure Peter will say he's done that, but this looks like a glaring, easy win, if you like, of increasing modal shift by providing connectivity to travel hubs. And I consider each train station to a travel hub. So we haven't done that recently. Another look at those would be really, really useful. Another example on the Melbourne one, I think I'm hoping it's Cambridge to Melbourne and it's not Cambridge to Royston at the moment, because we must avoid schemes where we deliver cycleways to the edge of busy roads and let people then just survive across those busy roads. There have actually been accidents on that road with cyclists and pedestrians in the past. So I think we need to be really careful that we're not designing something which itself is creating a safety issue. And I find that I'd be very worried that if we did that. I'd really find that quite a deal breaker for me in terms of the greenways. And then finally, on a similar safety theme, and it's specific to the genome path, I know people are now not using the genome path because they're worried about safety and lighting. So to elevate that, to make sure that the cycle routes that we do provide are deemed to be safe, because you're not going to get any modal shift if people aren't prepared to use them after dark. I think they were all observations rather than questions.
Thank you, Andy. Very useful indeed. Is there anyone else who would like to make any points? Because I do think actually it's quite important to, you have to keep those details in mind, and that's where dialogue with the local members is so important. Now I remember everything there is to know about junctions on the A505. But, I'm not the person who's there all the time. There are people who are there all the time, and we should make sure we talk to them. And at the same time, keep in mind the big picture. This will need to start advancing from somewhere if it is to advance at all. And I am very glad that I hope some of the decisions that we make today will make some strides towards what Iris and Yunus were asking about. And, and it would be really, really quite important that we keep not just them, all their friends, because, they came to us not because it's them, but because there's lots of people like them. They all need to use these things, and we should have all sorts of opportunities to showcase just how our young users get about on these very important pieces of infrastructure. Is there any more before I bring us to the recommendations? I see nothing, which means today we are recommended to note the results from the public engagement exercise that has been done so far, agree the outline business case for each greenway, agree to the submission of the required applications, including planning, etc., agree to use compulsory purchase powers where those are required, agree the programme of delivery for Barton, Horningsea, Melbourne and Sawston, and agree to finalise schemes for construction and complete a full business case, and finally agree to the early works. Now, that's a lot of recommendations. Hopefully that will also mean a lot of progress. Are we all happy with those? If I see no opposition, I will take those as unanimous. Thank you very much. That's done. And thank you, everybody. And thank you, Iris and Yunus. Thank you for reminding us why we're doing this. Which brings us to agenda item number 7, the electricity grid reinforcements. We have had no public questions on this item, which means we will start with an officer presentation, followed by feedback from Councillor Bick and the Assembly, and followed by debate. Niamh, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Chair. So this is somewhat unusual in that I think what we're just delivering is really good news around this project. So the board will remember, a range of debates around whether or not you were prepared to fund the electricity grid infrastructure that was outlined in the paper, you took the decision that you were prepared to do that. But what we also did at the same time as that sort of negotiation and discussion was work with UKPN and government colleagues to understand whether or not there were actually any other funding options. And as it turns out, UKPN have now agreed to fund this work. So in practice, what that means is that the GCP aren't footing the bill, which is good news. However, what we're asking here is that you acknowledge that, but also agree that even though the GCP isn't going to be asked to fund this anymore, actually officers think we ought to have a role in supporting UKPN to make sure that this stuff is still delivered to the timescale that we all want it to be. So that's the kind of key question around the scope of the project, I guess. One more thing, and board members have mentioned this outside of this room, but I don't think we should kind of underestimate the impact that we had around the discussions we had with government and with UKPN and with really helpful civil servants actually. That was months and months and months of work and lobbying that ultimately we got a really good outcome from. I think that's that, Chair.
Thank you, Niamh,
Thank
so
you.
much. And before I do anything else, thank you so much for all the work that has gone into this. There is nothing better than saying, we've done the hard work and actually now we might have even, less to spend than we would, Sometimes it pays. So thank you so much for that. So before we do any more discussions, Councillor Bick, would you like to tell us what the Assembly thought about this?
With great brevity, yes. So congratulations was the essence of the big message coming to the board. I think the members did believe that the initiative we had started to make had succeeded in provoking a solution and also enabling us to put some money back into our budget where it might be badly needed. I think the definition in your recommendations about the ongoing role of the GCP on this issue would be one that our conversation would have supported. There were some questions. I'm not telling you that it was a consensus view or even a clear view of what might be the case, but an invitation to the board to make sure that was all they thought was required. And not more. But apart from that, satisfaction with where we've got to so far.
Sounds about right. Would anybody like to make any comments on this? I do think it's a good idea for us to actually keep a little bit of ownership of something we have worked so hard for and so long. Andy?
I think I noted at the previous meeting as well, but the success of Greater Cambridge Partnership in doing this has been noted at national level, and other areas are looking to GCP for learnings on how they achieve this outcome.
Absolutely. Now, if there are no other... Yes, Andy, again, the other Andy.
Ditto, I think great progress. I was interested though, I think in earlier papers there was discussion about reinforcing the west side as well. What's happening there?
So that was raised at the Joint Assembly actually, and I've asked the question of the consultant that did all the hard work, and we'll come back to you with an answer.
Excellent. Anybody else would like to comment? If not, a repeat. Oh yes, Bridget.
Other than just to say well done, really, really good news story, and I hope I hope we are going to get full credit for this and show that actually we really sometimes we can achieve the impossible actually. So well done.
Yeah, absolutely. The first time I heard about where this was going, I thought never in a million years. But you guys are absolutely amazing. So thank you very much for that. We are being recommended to note and welcome the decision by UKPN to pay for the hard work that we've done, and to agree a new approach whereby we maintain a little bit of ownership of something that we have worked so hard for so long. So hopefully that will be helpful. Do I have any opposition to the recommendation? Done. Thank you everybody, and thank you again Niamh for all the help. Item number 1, agenda item number 8, SMART program. Again, we have had no public questions on this item, so we will start with a presentation on it, followed by joint assembly feedback and debate. Do I have Dan?
Thank you, Chair. So the Smart Cambridge programme was set up to explore how new and emerging technologies as well as data could support the delivery of the wider programme. To support this aim, the workstream engages with the private sector and academia to support the trialling of new technologies. An example of this is the £17.5 million of inward investment for the trialling of autonomous vehicles just announced, which is a partnership between the GCP industry with the support from Stagecoach and the University of Cambridge. Currently, the process of engagement tends to be reactive and unstructured. A number of these approaches don't align with GCP objectives, and sifting can be time-consuming. Procurement rules can also be a barrier to working with companies that approach the authority even when they are not seeking funding. And we aren't testing the whole market and so may not have sight of better solutions. The approach of developing an innovation prospectus will make engagement with the private sector and academia much more systematic and proactive, setting out the challenges that the GCP faces and how companies can engage with us, as well as a set of principles that companies will need to adhere to that will ensure the ethical use of data and cyber security. The advantages to this will be much more focused testing of technologies that can support and future-proof the delivery of the city deal, supports inward investment, as well as local companies being able to use the city as a test bed. And using the city as a test bed will allow us to understand technologies and how they can be applied. So initially the prospectus will focus on the City Access Programme, but it will be a living document that can support the delivery of other work streams and will evolve as we get feedback from the market to make it more efficient to use. Thank you.
Dan, thank you so very much indeed for that. What did we have about this from the Assembly, Councillor Big?
Support. I think we could see that the partnership is both important and necessary in the cause of innovation for the public good, and this looks to be a sensible way of keeping all of that focused and as efficient as possible. So, very, very supportive.
Sounds good. So we can discuss this item next. Do I have anyone who would like to intervene? Nobody? No? Well, of course, Bridget.
So can I just ask how we will be kind of reporting back on the success of this over time, please?
Yeah, so we'll keep a record of the companies that approach us, how we've engaged with them, and where we've deployed, what the results of those deployments will be, and potentially how we've scaled them up.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully we will, hear in due course. I mean, I'm hoping this is taken front and center in the SMART working group, which our esteemed colleague, Dr. Williams, is chairing. So hopefully that will continue to be part of the discussion. It's very exciting. It's very, very lovely stuff. And I hope that we push it out just to show the progress that we're making. So in the absence of further comment, we are being recommended to note the development of the prospectus and approve the approach of engagement with the market. In the absence of any opposition, I will take those recommendations as unanimous. Fine, done. Thank you very much, everybody, for that. We are now very swiftly proceeding to agenda item number 9, which is the quarterly progress report. Once again, we will start us off with Niamh and her officer presentation, and we will debate that after. So, Niamh, would you like to get going?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say first, our colleague from the County Council Finance team, Sarah Haywood's here. Given that this is a budget paper, she's here to provide some extra support. So just a couple of things on this paper. So as usual, we're outlining the progress across the programme. The most significant difference here is that we're asking you to agree the multi-year budget, which is set out in the papers. I guess one comment on that, and the chair of the Assembly may well pick this up in his feedback. We've taken a fairly prudent approach to budgeting this year for obvious reasons, and as we say in the papers, there's a pretty robust exercise to do around inflation, and that's underway, and we'll come back to the board in the coming months with you know, to start to have a discussion about some of those implications. Aside from budget, just a couple of other things. So we set out here the progress around the Gateway Review. So that's the work ongoing with government to essentially our kind of audit or assessment that the government put the GCP through to make sure that we're doing all the things that we said we'd do, and that's underway. You'll see from the overview there's some pretty tight deadlines to get that work done, and the team are working really hard to meet those deadlines. There's a lot of work we've got to do. We've got to get that started. Well, it has started, but in terms of the assessment of the projects, that will start from May, June time, and for at least for as long as possible, for at least 12 to 18 months. So that's all underway, just to keep the board updated. And at your last meeting, you agreed to support some additional work around annual data draw of corporate company performance. The Cambridge Ahead are leading that work, and the GCP are now a sponsor in addition to some other local organisations. Just to say that the presentation of the first lot of the work that you have sponsored is next week, and it should have gone round in diaries. There's one 8:30 Wednesday next week and one the following day as well. So if folk have time, that should be a pretty interesting way to spend the first hour of your working day next week. That's all I wanted to flag, Chair.
Thank you, Niamh, very much indeed. And can I just, before I bring other people in, absolutely note that, you know, Niamh always comes later in the agenda than the importance of these things ought to justify, especially today as we are looking at, you know, our annual budget. These things are absolutely very important. And for anyone out there who wants to know how and why we are spending our money, do please have a look at page 87 of your agenda pack, where it's all laid out so very clearly. And, you know, I would like to commend people for actually, you know, doing a very good job of making a very clear presentation of numbers, which are sometimes a little bit, you know, numbers. But thank you so much for all of that, and absolutely very important that we pay attention to it. What did we get from the Assembly on this, Councillor Bick?
Well, drawing together comments that came across actually many items on the agenda, there is obviously a concern about the impact of inflation, and as your report says, we were assured that the partnership was going to review that and consider what actions, if any, were necessary in the autumn, which is something that we would hang on to. But given that, we supported the way forward proposed for the budget. And the second point was in relation to the way we track progress on projects. So if you look at page 70 of your papers, where you have the transport delivery overview, it was raised at our previous meeting that that on occasions the target completion date for projects had been changed, and that had not been as a result of a transparent discussion or decision, but detective work had discovered that the previous time they were reported, the target date was different from the current one. Last time we raised this, the officers agreed that we would not do that anymore, that would be a transparent process, so that if there was a need to revise a completion date, then that would be reported through the Assembly and the Board, and that was welcome at the time and still welcome. But then a further point arises, and I think this has a logic to it as well, that we should track original target completion date alongside revised target completion date, so that we understand across the whole life of a project what has happened and decisions that have been taken, and elongations or even abbreviations of programs. We can see it all there on the same table, and I think it makes for the tracking of progress much easier. And I think that in the meantime that has been agreed, and So next time round, we would be seeing that on these tables. The final point really came out of the discussion on the preparation for the Gateway review, it was raised whether, in addition to focusing on getting through the next Gateway, we should also be thinking of whether we could make a case for a continuation of the City deal, so that people, it was talked about City Deal 2, and so I am relaying that question. My suggestion is, my request is to the board that there probably is a right time and a wrong time to consider that question, I think it requires some guidance from the board about when that right time would be, because from the perspectives of many of the members of the public, although we might feel we're very far advanced in planning out our entire 15-year programme, actually not so much of it is yet visible and delivered finally. And so that is all taking longer, and I think that was always going to be the case. That is obviously a consideration. But another one is that perhaps we need to get through our last Gateway review before we start to open up that question too. Anyway, those are points that I'm suggesting to you based on a question from, I think, a couple of members of the Assembly who felt that we should be getting into that way of thinking. My suggestion is that perhaps we put a bit of discipline around that so that we don't start counting our chickens before they're hatched, and actually ensure that we're building on something that we can really point to. But anyway, I've said enough, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vick. Those are all very useful comments, which I am sure we will chew over. Was there any comment you wanted to make in response to that, Niamh? Is it all taken on from the Assembly?
Yeah, I think so. We've picked up some of the points outside actually around target forecast dates, and we'll bring that back next time.
Fabulous. No, thank you very much for that. In terms of quarterly report, I mean, in terms of the report, we're just being asked to note it, which I am sure won't be a controversial recommendation. But we also have to agree the multi-year budget strategy, which of course is more a substantive recommendation. Is there any more intervention to be made in the debate? Going once, going twice? Yes, Bridget.
Thank you. Can I just ask, I haven't asked for a long time about the 1,000 additional affordable homes targets. I remember talking a lot about it a long time ago. I mean, obviously, my understanding is that there's never been any money allocated to this, and it's a sort of number counting exercise. I mean, I'm presuming, I mean, personally, I feel it's quite arbitrary and rather meaningless. But I presume because that was part of the original deal, we are kind of obligated to keep on doing it. It just worries me that, you know, we look as if we're not being wildly successful when actually it's something that's completely and utterly outside of our control. Rachel's just nodding.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
I mean, I am sure we can probably do a bit more discussion around it, but I do think the facts probably won't really change.
I suggest it's just explanation. Yeah. I think it's a factual explanation. Just, you know, for somebody who doesn't know any background reading it, you know, they're going, well, you know, you're kind of 400 houses short, but actually it's just not the case. And of course, the whole house building climate has changed, and we're not overrun with exception sites anymore, and we rarely build exclusively affordable housing exception sites these days because the feasibility just doesn't stack up. So I think, you know, perhaps we just need a bit of clearer narrative in there, so anybody reading it blind will understand.
We can do that, can't we, in terms of presentation? Yes, Rachel.
Well, the Chair of the Assembly is smiling because we have been round this loop at the Assembly a few times, and you know, we have actually tried a number of times to clarify that narrative, but it is just what we inherited from the original city deal. I think the interventions we're making from the rest of the programme are much more meaningful in terms of what our contribution is to housing. And obviously the decision that you took a few months ago around supporting the relocation of Waterbeach Rail Station, for example, you know, we will be reporting as part of housing, and that's, you know, additionality that you didn't have in the original city deal, but will absolutely contribute to thousands of homes being delivered and is much more meaningful, as well as the other busway schemes that, of course, are predicated on local plan targets. So, but this one in itself is just an arbitrary thing, and it's about, you know, windfall sites that we don't have any control over.
I mean, if Chair, I can come back through you. So my concern is a civil servant reading it, you know, who will take it absolutely at face value, which is why I think we need to be smarter about it.
We probably can consider, you know, wording is always possible to do. There's always another way that you can say the same thing, but it is a point well made, and actually I think in terms of discussing our programme more broadly and more widely, not just the individual bits that are up for decision because we're going out there and building them. This does have an influence because actually, you know, the housing targets, which are so much outside of our control, and actually, you know, even when you sit on a housing authority, which I do not, I sometimes feel like they're outside of your control, but these are the people that are going to be using our infrastructure. So the link is a lot closer than it might appear necessarily. But, no, that's all very useful, and I hope that it will inform future paper writing. In the absence of any more comments, we are noting the progress report. We are also agreeing the multi-year budget strategy starting 23-24. Am I okay to take all of this as unanimous, which we will now do? Thank you very much. And this concludes the substantive items on the agenda today. So thank you so much for a very efficient meeting. We will meet again as currently planned on the 29th of June 2023. So see you all back then, and have a lovely rest of your day.